Come on in and tell a friend. It's time for a mental health check-in. I said, come on in and tell a friend. It's time for a mental health check-in. Did they tell you that it's time to check in? Oh my, did they tell you that it's time to check in? Hey, everybody. I said, come on in and tell a friend. It's time for a mental health check in. I said, come on in and tell a friend. It's time for a mental health check in. Did they tell you that it's time to check in? Oh my, did they tell you that it's time to check in? Hey, y'all. Welcome to our mental health check-in, where we check in with you and your mental health. I bring in a wonderful expert that comes in and talks to us about our mental health and different topics that we bring up. Last week, we talked about domestic violence because it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. This week, we are going to be talking about ADHD, because it is also ADHD Awareness Month. And for those of you who do not know, I do have ADHD. Yours truly, yes. And so I wanted to talk about this as well. And so I am really excited about having her. So let me bring in Dr. P. If this is your first time here, welcome. This will be your first time with Dr. P and I. And if it is not, welcome back. Hello, Dr. P.
Hi, good
How are you
evening.
doing today?
I am wonderful. How about you, sis? How you
I'm
doing?
doing.
Hair looks great, by the way. You
Thank you.
know.
Thank you. I got it done today.
Oh, come through with the curls. I see you. I
Yes,
see
I
you.
got it done today, and I
I
like
love
it
it.
very much. She asked me, "Do you really want the heart in the front? We have to do that." I said, "Literally, that's the only reason that I'm here. Only reason. If you don't get anything else that I want from
Give
this
me the
hairstyle,
give me this
I
this
need this
part
part.
here.
This part,
I love
it
it.
it has to
Love
happen."
it. I love
So
it. Love it.
I'm so glad that you're here with us again, and having, I guess, a little bit of a lighter conversation, but still a very necessary conversation,
For
especially
sure.
for the climate that we are in. I was diagnosed with ADHD. First I was diagnosed with ADD at 10
Hmm.
years old.
Mm.
And then I went to a private school that kind of helped with learning disabilities and all of that. And it was really great. And then around 21, going into college was really rough. I got sick, got out of college. It was just very tough. The structured environment, I was just scatterbrained.
Mm.
And what we did not know is that untreated ADD can progress into ADHD. So at 21,
Hmm.
I got diagnosed with ADHD. So I've been
Mm.
living with ADD and ADHD for 28 years.
Wow.
Yeah, about 20 years or so. And
Mm.
back when I was 10 years old, it was not a lot of information about it. It wasn't a lot of people that had it. And now we have way progressed,
Yeah.
and it seems like a lot of women are getting diagnosed with ADHD now. A lot of men are
Yes.
getting diagnosed with ADHD. A lot of
Hmm.
people are coming out about having this ADHD diagnosis, and it's
Hmm.
awareness month. So I wanted us to talk about it and
Yeah.
understand it through a cultural lens.
Yeah. Yeah.
ADHD is often misunderstood or dismissed in many
Hmm.
communities, especially in families of color. But from your experience, how can parents move beyond the stigma or denial and begin to
Mhm.
understand ADHD as a legitimate neurodevelopmental difference, not a lack
Yeah.
of discipline?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And before I answer that, thank you again for having me and sharing your space with me. I truly appreciate it. It's
Of
always a joy to be here with you. And you've been using the term ADD and ADHD, and there might be some folks on here who might not exactly know what that means. So ADHD, to start off with, is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
course.
Now, the medical community updated the name ADD, which is attention deficit disorder, to ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, to reflect the fact that the condition can include both inattentive and hyperactive or impulsive symptoms, or a combination of the two. So, in many communities of color, ADHD is very misread, right? And we look at it as a behavior thing or a parenting thing, rather than something that has to do with our neurodevelopment. So
Mhm.
I often remind parents, even like myself, and especially those who are from communities of color and immigrant families and things like that. Um, and collectivist cultures too, that ADHD is not necessarily a parenting failure. It's not a moral failure by any chance. It's actually a brain-based difference in how our children are going to process attention, their emotions, and impulse control, right? And so when we name that difference, we move from shame and calling people out and move that to strategy, right? So the goal is not necessarily to fix the child, but really to understand how the child's brain works so that we as adults can support them better. And I say we as adults as in like the community, the family, teachers, parents, whoever is at school, right? And so I encourage parents, when I worked closely with parents, I would encourage them to start off with curiosity, right? Asking the questions instead of trying to correct the child per se, right? And so asking them, or asking themselves or whoever, what does my child need at this time, at this moment, instead of what is wrong with my child? Like what is going on with my child? So I would say that's kind of the approach in working with families of color.
It's powerful. Tend to use and look at what's wrong instead of the why um, of the situation and having different seasons. I think like just do like any other diagnosis, doctor this doctor give you like, something that you have no or like research start reading up on different sides. We tend to look what it looks like. And so my son was just diagnosed with ADHD about a year or so ago. Immediately out where it's reach out has to be
Hmm.
more and more and I did this really brilliant information when we think of emotional regulation and family dynamics. One of the biggest things ADHD and then with disorder can it on paper.
So I lost some of what you were saying because my headphones started to act up a little bit. I am so sorry. And so I was like trying to switch it out, but I also didn't want to interrupt you because you were speaking and all of those things. So would you please repeat that question?
Yes, so we know that children in general struggle with impulsivity and
Mhm.
and activity portion is but
Mhm.
that struggle to manage impulsivity or emotional
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so when a child who has ADHD feels what we would say like out of control, what they need the most is an adult who is actually grounded, right? And so an adult who is not going to lose control with them at the same time, right? And I know that it's really hard. It's easier said than done, and it's really hard when you're triggered too, especially if you grew up in a home or a household where emotions were not tolerated, right? And you weren't allowed to feel, you weren't allowed to express feelings and that sort of thing. So I tell parents to think in terms of structure and structure with softness, right? Where we have clear routines, we have consistent consequences. And the important thing about those two things is that we're pairing them with connection, right? And so we're using a calm tone, we have visual reminders, we're doing body breaks and things like that. And it's not even just for your child, but for you too. So one of the things that I've actually been doing lately is like teaching my sons how to like emotionally regulate, and we're doing like little skills here and there where you do like belly breathing and things like that. And we lay down on the carpet with a teddy bear on our stomachs, and we take a deep breath in and deep breath out, and we see the teddy bear going kind of up and down, right? And so we do it together, right? So they see me doing it, and it's easier to engage them in doing that. And that one thing that we need to remember is that regulation is something that is contagious, right? So when you as an adult or you as a parent, you're modeling calm, you're also teaching emotional safety more powerfully than any kind of like talking to or lecture could ever do, really.
Wow.
Mhm.
The emotional
Mhm.
to kind of
Yes, yes, yes. I need you to take a deep breath, right? And like my son said to me years ago, Mommy, you need to take a chill pill, right? We need to take a chill pill ourselves and to be able to like calm ourselves down. And the thing is that if we don't know some of these skills, we're not going to be able to teach our kids. So we also have to learn these skills as parents.
I think have to have great. Here's
Absolutely. Yes.
learn
Mm-hmm.
talk things
Yes.
your body regularly needs to do. And I think like we are hyper focused on our regulation, hyper focused
Mm-hmm.
on our
Right.
start still start feeling better. Oh, we're good. We're better. But
Right.
and this your regulation is going to be super crucial.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. That is definitely important.
Okay, hold on. They're saying my sound is going in and out. I tried to switch to my fancy microphone, but it's not cooperating. So I switched
Uh-oh.
back mic. Is that
Uh-oh.
Facebook and YouTube? Is that better? I have to have my tech guy come and fix my microphone settings. I've messed them up,
Okay. Uh
royally messed them up.
uh-oh.
Okay, so when we think about that, regulating yourself first, making sure that you are modeling the behaviors that you want your children to model as well. When
Mm-hmm.
you think of that, parenting a child with ADHD can be exhausting and
Mm-hmm.
emotionally draining. So,
Mm-hmm.
how can parents care for their own mental health while still
Mm-hmm.
showing up consistently for their children?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When it comes to parenting a child who is what we would call neurodivergent, which is what we call folks who have ADHD, it's a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. So as a parent, you're managing appointments, you're managing behaviors, you're managing emotions, right? And while you're doing all of this, you're also trying to hold yourself together, right? And so I always encourage parents, and even I do this too, right, to check in with their own nervous systems first, right? So that might mean having somebody that you can talk to, somebody that you can vent to, somebody who sees you and understands you and will say, yeah, girl, that is true, right? This is not you going crazy or you being over, like just overreacting about something, right? And so we think about having a therapist, a friend, somebody close that we can trust, a community also, right? Or just even like 5 minutes of quiet in your car before you walk in the house, right? And it's okay to say that you need a break. Like I don't take my 5 minutes, for granted at all. Whenever I pull up to the house, I have to sit in the car for 5 minutes. And I remember a few years ago, my mom used to ask me, why are you always sitting in the car? Why don't you just come in? And I said, I need to get my brain calm, because especially like if you are a parent who is also neurodivergent or have ADHD like myself, right? And you're parenting a child who, is starting to show these characteristics. It's like you've got your own stuff going on and you see it happening in a little child, and then you're seeing all the behaviors that you may have shown and things that you're struggling with, and it's happening in real time in front of you. Like, it's okay to say that you need a break. Okay. It's okay to say that you need a break, and you're still going to be a great parent. There are times that I have to hide in my closet, right? There's times that I have to hide in my bedroom and lock my door. And I let my children know, mommy needs a break right now, right?
Yeah.
And so you needing a break does not make you a bad parent, right? And your child does not need perfection. They need a parent who is emotionally available and emotionally stable and emotionally intelligent. And that is only going to happen if you are resourced, you're rested, and you're also feeling supported. And like I said, I'm a parent myself, so I understand that it's easier said than done because there's so many things that you're trying to do. But I think that if we prioritize and name some of these things, we can kind of catch ourselves in the moment, like, ooh, sounds like mommy needs a break, right? And then take a step back and kind of regulate ourselves, or even invite the children to like regulate with us, right? Because you can just let the kids know, listen, mommy's feeling really flustered right now, so we need to take a moment here, right? Can we do some deep breathing? Are we cool? Are we good? All right, let's do this together. Right.
And I think like it is so true. Like they don't talk enough about neurodivergent parents raising neurodivergent children.
Yeah. Yes.
Because it's different. It's
very different.
And so I'm so glad that you noted that, because I do think that there is something to be said about the need for you to kind of not see yourself all the way, but sometimes see yourself in your child, just so that you can create that level of empathy that they need. Because I can remember like not having that much empathy given to me at that age. It was just you're doing stuff. you're just
doing the most.
Sit down somewhere. Sit down.
Right.
And so like trying to wrap around that, I think is so crucial. I'm glad that you brought that up. When we think about schools and advocacies, and I mean the Department of Education or not, and Donald Duck is the president, and so families are finding it difficult to advocate for their child's needs at school.
Yeah, that's true.
Especially when teachers misunderstand ADHD behaviors. What advice do you have for parents navigating 504 plans and IEPs and open communication with educators who, especially for our skin color, may not show that much grace and compassion to our Black son that they would a Caucasian blue-eyed baby?
Yeah, that is true, right? And I also understand that advocating for our children can feel intimidating, especially when these systems were not necessarily designed with our culture and our cultural experiences in mind, right? My biggest advice for that is that we have to know what our rights are, and we need to make sure that we're documenting everything. So at most school districts, the school districts, if your child needs an individualized educational plan, which is the IEP, they hand you a book of rights, right, as a parent and as a student. And so you need to make sure that you're reading these documents, and if it's something that you're not understanding, like sit with somebody who you think might understand it and have them explain some of these things to you, right? And so you need to be also able to like learn the difference between a 504, and an IEP, and really like don't be afraid to bring someone with you to these meetings too, right? And so when we're approaching teachers, it's also important to remember that these are folks that we're leaving our children, our precious babies with. So if we're approaching our teachers, we need to approach them as partners for our children's development and not necessarily like as adversaries, right? And making sure that we're using like the we language, right? Because we're all here to make sure that the child is learning, and they're learning in ways that are going to like stick, and they're going to feel supported and things like that. And so it's important for us to go in as a community, right? And so saying things like, we've noticed these patterns at home also, right? But how can we support consistency? How can we do something different here? And so a lot of times when schools see you as an informed parent, they see that you're collaborative with them, they're more likely to respond with respect instead of like some resistance, right? And so it's important for us to, check in with the teachers, check in with the parents, whoever, and download the communication apps, for example, and making sure that we're keeping up to date with the teachers, getting updates and things like that. Because if you're a parent who is not as engaged, you're not going to know what's going on with your child, right? And then sometimes you have these IEP meetings where there's changes that need to happen, and because you've been checked out the entire quarter or entire semester, you get to these meetings and it's like, whoa, when did my child start doing this, or when did my child start this behavior? Because you haven't necessarily, checked in over the year.
That makes a lot of sense. When we talk about building confidence in ADHD kids, children with ADHD often internalize shame from constant correction or comparison. What can parents do daily to affirm their child's identity and build confidence while still holding them accountable to what they're responsible to doing?
Ooh, this question almost feels kind of like personal, right? Because I was that child that had to like, there was a lot of work we had to do, thank God for grace and resources. But kids who have ADHD, they hear stop, don't do it, sit down and things like that way more often than they hear the words good job or I'm proud of you, right? And over time, that is going to chip away at the child's confidence. So I tell parents, to intentionally catch their child being successful, catch your child being good, even in small ways, right? And sometimes it's literally just following a direction, right? If they're showing some sort of creativity, if they're being kind to their little sister or their little brother, or a kid on the playground, and you see it happening. We have to learn to praise the efforts of our children and not just the outcome. So you see that they're putting in that effort. They're trying to stay in the line. They might not be exactly where they need to be, but they're trying. We need to be able to notice that in our children and make sure that they know that we see them, right? And so we also have to communicate with our children that their brains are not broken, because sometimes kids hold that kind of like really rigid belief that their brains are broken or there's something wrong with them. It's just that it's wired differently, right? And that wiring is going to come with strengths like innovation, creativity, empathy, resilience, and things like that. And another thing is that accountability can exist at the same time as affirmation, right? Accountability can exist with affirmation, right? And so when it comes to discipline, one of the things that we forget as parents is that discipline is there to teach and not to shame, right? And so if we're trying to discipline our children, we need to do it in a way that they're going to walk out of that situation, not with resentment per se, but learning something, right? So whatever way in which you're disciplining your child, you have to ask yourself, what do I want my child to learn out of this? Right? What do I want them to learn out of this way in which I'm disciplining them? Right? And so we really have to do better as parents. Like some of us were called lazy, some of us, were called absent-minded all the time and things like that. And I didn't even know a lot of the stuff until, I don't know, like two or 3 years ago when I was diagnosed with ADHD, right? And I had to, it was this moment of reckoning that I had to come to, and grief also as someone who was diagnosed as an adult, and having to be kind to myself and like talk to my child version of myself, and like let little Phoebe know, hey, you're not lazy, you weren't lazy, your brain is
Yeah.
just wired differently, right? It's okay that you have to do 5 billion things at once to be able to like maintain your attention, which a lot of times kind of sounds like ironic or like an oxymoron or something like that. But like for a lot of folks, it's like, I'm at a conference, I'm sitting here, I'm paying attention, I promise I'm paying attention, but I'm also like fidgeting with a toy over here, and I'm typing on my phone over here, because that is what it's going to take for me to be able to like understand everything that you're saying, right?
Yeah.
But as a child, if you're having to do all these multiple things, like, it's like, why can't you just do one thing at once? Well, my brain is not wired that way. I can't do that, right? It's almost like physically impossible to do some of these things. So we really, really have to like hone in on the words that we're using with our children, because they're going to carry this, like you said, internalizing shame. They're going to carry this, and this is going to impact their self-esteem. And so then you end up with adults who don't believe in themselves, who are struggling with things like imposter syndrome, quote unquote, and things like that. And so we really, really, really have to watch our words with our children.
It's true. Speak well, think well, so you can produce well. It's just a true statement. This is my favorite part of the mental health check-in. It's when we get to check in with you all. And so I already see some questions that have already come through. But this is our time. So you're going to be able to go ahead and ask questions. You can type them in the comment box. If you would like to ask your question anonymously on Instagram, you can do so by hitting the question bubble, and I will just read the question, but keep your name anonymous. If you would like to ask questions on YouTube or Facebook, same way, just post it in the comments and we will read the ones that come through. What I have so far is, I don't know if this was already covered, but how do we differentiate between ADHD and trauma? I parented a child with ADHD, but now that I am doing foster parenting, I am seeing a whole different type of ADHD.
That is such a great question. The truth is that there is some overlap, right? And so the overlap is going to be where there is difficulty concentrating, there is that hyperactivity, there is impulsivity, and then there's also emotional dysregulation. These are things that are going to exist both in a child who has experienced trauma, or like something significant or a distressing event that has happened in their life, and also the neurodevelopmental disorder of ADHD, right? And so the thing with it is that trauma, or I would say like PTSD or something like that, right? ADHD, even though ADHD is a lifelong kind of disorder, right? It's a condition, but then trauma is going to be caused by like a specific event or a specific series of events, right? And ADHD is typically present from childhood. You can see these things in children. And then as you're getting older, like, the symptoms might shift a little bit, but they're still pretty consistent. But trauma can happen at any age, right? Whether you're a child or adult. So I would say like that's the biggest difference. And then actually when it comes to another difference there, ADHD symptoms are more persistent and they're pervasive. They're consistent. They're happening, pretty frequently. But trauma symptoms are going to be different. They're going to depend on the situations. The symptoms are going to show up situationally, right? And might be related to a specific thing that happens. So if somebody is unable to like focus, you know that it's something that happens. Oh yeah, I struggle with focusing at work. But for somebody who has experienced trauma, it might take them taking a walk down the alley where they experience a trauma, like being attacked. And so that is what is going to trigger that sort of symptom that we might see in the person. But with ADHD, there really isn't a trigger, right? It's very salient. It's there all the time. I hope that makes sense.
Gotcha. Yes, it does. It makes a lot of sense. This Krubu says, will a child with ADHD shut down in school?
Absolutely. Children who have ADHD will shut down because sometimes the stimulus gets too much. And for children too, they are not able to, one, remove themselves from the classroom or from the space, and two, be able to, they don't always have the language to be able to express themselves. And so for them, it's easier to just shut down and just like turn off all the lights and put their head down, and then that's it, because it's just, there's just way too much happening, right? And so instead of like, getting into that fighting mode or whatever, it's more of like, I'm just going to sit here and protect myself because this is just too much. So absolutely, yes, it will happen. Yeah.
Can you see the opposite too, though? Can a child with ADHD become impulsive and exciting and too much in school? So you can both things can happen. They could shut down completely, or they could rear up and be a nightmare. It's just you're never really sure. And then the other hard part is that could be per class. Depending on the stimulation or dopamine that they are getting per teacher and per classroom, the people they're sitting by in the different classrooms, like there are a lot of different factors that go into the reactions and responses that come from an ADHD brain. And so you really just have to be as patient as you possibly can.
Absolutely.
Someone said, it's mental health the same as mental illness?
That is such a great question. So mental health is a very broad term, right? That is going to include, it's like the umbrella. So it's going to include mental illness in there. So just think about like your general health, right? And then you can have, diabetes, sciatica, like all of these different things that happen in there. So mental health is just the overall well-being of the mental faculties, the brain and everything that comes with it. And then the mental illness is something that can occur within mental health or can be diagnosed under mental health. So.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. That makes sense. Okay. Let me see. Did I get any more over here? Didn't get any over there. Both of my children have ADHD. What are ADHD? I think that she meant are, because I know a lot of people say, I don't have it, I was diagnosed with it. And so are ADHD. What helped me was when Bishop Jakes preached the law of first mention. It was a life changer. So I knew that when I taught my children something, I had to teach it first the right way. Yes, I used medication, but I still had to parent and watch the medication. What are your thoughts on parents that decide to put their young children on medication to help with their ADHD diagnosis?
You know what? That is a very individual decision, right? And there are going to be parents who are okay with medication, and there's some parents who are not going to be okay with medication. The reality of it is that a lot of research has gone into medications, right? And how effective they are or not. And so the thing is that if you choose to put your child on medication, it's not like you're just drugging your child, right? You're giving your child the things that they need to not have to overcompensate for some of the things that are going on in their brain, right? And so if your child is put on medication, it's to make their brain work less, right? And so it's almost like having to do math problems and you have the option of using a calculator, but you're like, nah, I would like to, figure this out on my own and draw my little sticks and everything. There's nothing wrong with that, right? And at the same time, there is something that could make this a little easier for you, right? And so your child might not necessarily have as much noise in their head whenever they are on medication. They might, be able to regulate themselves better when they're on medication. And I know that a lot of parents, worry about side effects. And with everything, there's with every medication, really, there's going to be some side effects. And so you kind of have to weigh the two, right? Are the side effects going to be worth the relief that this child is going to get from taking medication? And for some, the reality of it also is that for some parents or for some children, I would say, it might be a trial and error until you find one that is going to
The
work,
right one.
or finding the exact dosage that is going to work. And so I know that a lot of families just kind of give up on the way, like, you know what, medication didn't help. Well, it's because you haven't found the right one yet, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're choosing to not do medication as a parent, you also have to be willing to do the work it requires to help your child manage their behaviors, and to be able to teach them the skills to be able to manage their behavior and maintain their attention, right? And so, you know, like even for me, I realized after being diagnosed that I was working really, really hard to try to like maintain my attention, because I have the inattentive type, right? And so I didn't realize that my brain was running on overdrive. And so I was like, you know what, no wonder I'm always tired. Like, because it feels like I just have this fog and I'm exhausted all the time. Well, because since you're running on fumes, your brain is just going at 100 miles per hour every single day. And so of course you're exhausted, right? And so for some of us, you know, whenever medication is something that is whenever medication is introduced, it helps us slow down a little bit, helps our brains slow down. And so instead of doing 100 miles per hour, we're kind of like at 50, 75, just kind of cruising right there. So like I said, it's an individual decision, and it's important that we do our research on it. Please don't go to TikTok University, you know, unless you're, you know, listening to a practicing, you know, medical professional or healthcare professional and that sort of thing when it comes to some of these things like medication. I know that we're learning a lot online and we are in the information overload age, but we also have to be cognizant of where we're getting the information, right? And so there are some folks, even some doctors and things like that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm able to talk about, because it's not necessarily within my scope of practice when it comes to natural herbs. But there's a lot of different ones out there. And I think if you talk to your doctor or your naturopath, somebody like that, you would be able to get some information on that.
Makes sense. Okay. Uranta, I am a little hazy. Okay, because I was a little hazy with your question. I'm gonna try not to butcher this. Good evening. I am watching you from Scotland, United Kingdom. I want to find out, how do you harvest children not to how do you advise how do you advise students to take medication? I'll skip that. Okay. How do you advise students to take medication if it is necessary? Taking it all is not important to take medication. That's why I want to know. How do you advise someone when they are on medication?
Well, I guess it also depends on what setting you find yourself in. And so if somebody is on medication, you know, like, and it's working for them, yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so you just kind of leave it where it's at when it comes to medication. But it's not necessarily, unless you're a medical professional, I would not recommend having conversations about, or not conversations, but like, recommendations about medications, you know, and things like that. So,
and I think in that case, the best advice that you could give is for them to seek their primary physician in whatever it is that they feel they may need or may not need going further. Because like she said, it is a yin yang dance. It took almost 6 months for my psychiatrist to find the right combination, extended release, not extended release, 30 milligrams, 22 milligrams, 25 milligrams, trying to find the right combination for for your brain. And so sometimes the best advice you can give is to be there. We've talked a lot about this, being there with someone without judgment, just to be there and say, hey, I don't really have any medical advice I can give you, but I am here. And I do think that you should talk to your doctor about whether you should be on medication or not, if you feel that it's necessary or not. But whatever you decide, I'm your friend. I'm here. I love you. And I want to be a part of this journey with you, and just do it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that sounds wonderful. And so, because at the end of the day, there is autonomy, right? And so everyone is going to decide what works for them. Some people, Ritalin will work. For some people, Vyvanse will work. For some people, Adderall will work. It depends, right? And for some folks, it's just like, you know what? I don't feel like any of these are working. I'm going to take the more behavioral approach and
Yeah.
actually like create systems that are going to help me succeed. And so it really all depends on what your
Mhm.
your needs are. And I remember I read a book actually recently in the last few months called ADHD 2.0, and they talked about these kinds of things too, about how folks are using different behavioral interventions to cope with their ADHD symptoms, and they also talk about medications and things like that. I
Oh,
really like
cool.
that book. Yeah, ADHD 2.0. It was wonderful,
Okay.
and it's actually written by medical doctors.
Okay. ADHD 2.0
Hmm.
book.
By Dr. Hollowell and Dr. Rady.
Howell, Howell.
Hallowell, Hallowell, and
Okay.
Rady, Ratey. And there's also
Okay.
so many books on parenting children who have ADHD.
There
And so
are.
I would say, yeah, there's so many. So I highly recommend like educating yourself on what ADHD means, because a lot of us don't know what it means, right? Some of us are from cultures where that diagnosis was not necessarily something that was common or discussed at all. And so even for me, when I was diagnosed, I had to come home and talk to my Ghanaian mother, and let her know, hey, so this is what's going on with me. And she said, oh my goodness, it all makes sense. I've always wondered about you. And it was such a
Wow.
beautiful conversation to have, because then it was a chance for both of us to learn, right? I explained a lot of things to her. I mean, it led to a whole lot of conversations, but we can talk about that later. But it was just really lovely to see a parent who was invested in their child, and wanting to understand their child, right? When it comes to neurodivergence and ADHD, it really comes down to curiosity and trying to establish understanding, because our brains are not going to behave or react in the same way. And that's what makes it beautiful too, in some ways.
Yes, it does. It does in a huge way. And
Mhm.
like she said, outside of just books, there's podcasts, y'all. There are a
Yes.
plethora of ADHD parenting podcasts. There are
Mhm.
tons of books. There's tons of YouTube videos. Like, just
Yes.
really take some time
Mhm.
to really get as prepared as you can
Mhm.
for the journey
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah.
I did see a question on here earlier. Yes. If a person doesn't have depression, should you diagnose a person who doesn't have it?
Well, to diagnose somebody with depression, they have to meet a certain number of criteria. And so, for example, they would receive a screener called the PHQ-9, which is a Patient Health Questionnaire 9. It has 9 questions. And so they have to like receive a certain kind of score on there. And it's going to go through like the different symptoms that, folks who have depression would be experiencing, right? And so, for example, on the PHQ-9, it's going to ask questions like, have you had little interest or pleasure in doing things? Have you been feeling down or depressed? Are you having trouble staying or falling asleep, or sleeping too much? Are you feeling tired? Like, so there's a whole lot of different questions, like, are you having thoughts of not being alive and things like that. So if the person is meeting the criteria for that, and when we score that, they're scoring, a certain number and up, then it's clinically significant. So we can diagnose them with depression. But we don't just diagnose people with depression.
Yeah. And that's wisdom, you know. What
Hmm.
what are some strategies to support a friend with ADHD when you notice life stressors, work, family, etc. are heightened?
That is such a beautiful question to even like
It
think about
is.
how to support somebody. I know that for a lot of folks, even the question of like, what do you need, can be so overwhelming, because then they actually have to engage their
Think
mental
about it.
faculties and think about it, right? And so for folks who have ADHD, whenever we're feeling overwhelmed, I think that sometimes we need people who are just problem solvers. And so
Yeah.
if you know very well that I have to go pick up my kid at 3 p.m. and you know that you're free at 3 p.m., you could offer to go pick up my kid. Of course, if you're on, the approved pickup list at the school, there's that caveat. But I'm referring to filling in the gaps for folks. If you're seeing that, they're not, for example, picking up their goods on time and things like that, you can offer to do that. And also, I think it's important for us to have conversations with our friends about the different symptoms that they're experiencing and how their brain works, because ADHD is not going to look the same for every single person. Right? Because there's also different types of ADHD. There's a combined type, there's the inattentive type, there's a hyperactive type, like there's all these different types. And so it's not going to present the same. So if you have a friend who has, ADHD, it's really important that we have conversations about, how does your ADHD manifest, right?
Yeah.
What does that look like? What do you feel like you struggle with the most? And just like being there as an understanding friend, because those are the friends who might sometimes be late to different things, because there's a thing called time blindness. And so you might have that friend who is consistently late or constantly late, and you might get irritated, right? And so sometimes it's more helpful to have a friend who understands you, right? And so if you have folks who are forgetting important details, for example, or you have friends who just kind of like zone off a little bit, they're not making eye contact a little bit. Every time you're I would say every time you're talking to them, it's like they look over here and they look over there, right? It's not that they're not interested in what it is that you're talking about, but we have what we call a squirrel moment, right? Where there's something that's walking by and it's like, oh, wait, what was that? Okay. And yeah, so, back to the conversation we were having. And so it's so beautiful that, for some of my friends who have been diagnosed as adults and, as adult women too, we're having these conversations and then something happens, but we understand each other so well that we just burst out laughing because we know exactly what it is that happened. And so I think that, patience is something that is going to come in very handy when it comes to supporting a friend, being there as a listening ear, and also just, I don't know, just kind of asking them the questions, right? What is it?
Yeah.
What is it like for you, right? What is going on in your brain? Talk to me about what's going on in your brain, and just be prepared that sometimes it might be all over the place. We will get to a conclusion, but it might take us a few, wiggly moments to get to the point of what we're trying to say. And so I think it's great, and we have to also educate ourselves on ADHD, because another thing that folks who have ADHD struggle with is interjection, because of the impulsivity, right? So whenever you're talking, they might feel the need to interject and say something, because there's this pressure that if I don't get it out right now, I'm going to forget, which is what typically happens, right? And so there's this interjection, and they also want you to know that they understand you, and that's their way of letting you know that they understand you. And so it might seem like this person, like, why are you always making it about you? No, I'm not making it about me. I'm just trying to let you know I feel you, sis.
Yeah, I
and
I
so,
get it.
and so it's a struggle. So definitely a lot of patience is required. Yes.
Yes. And I think when they're not heightened, like just a cute, cool idea. One of my best friend, she has ADHD too. It's not as prevalent as mine. However, she can struggle with getting overwhelmed about where to eat. And so we thought of like a jar, like put a bunch of different restaurants in this jar, and when she can't think of something, then we go to the jar. Or I'll send a poll, like, okay, there's 3 restaurants in this poll, you have to pick out of this poll. So like finding out different things that like she said,
yes,
that she struggles with this, like she may forget to eat. She could
that
forget
part.
to eat. So send a pizza over to the house. Send a DoorDash over. Hey girl, just want to make sure that you ate today. Just shows like I'm intentionally thinking about you. And then when you have friends that are ADHD as well, like she said, there is this time blindness. So we don't necessarily miss people.
Mhm.
And so making a point in your calendar or on your alarm, like check in with my ADHD friend. It's like just a check in. Hey, just checking in with you, making sure that you're okay,
Right.
helps as well. And encouragement jars. So like sit down and write like 30 different encouraging statements that you want to give her, 30 things you want to compliment or appreciate about her,
Mm.
and put them in
Mm.
a jar and say, hey, I noticed that
Mhm.
sometimes life can get the better of you. And when it does, I wanted you to have an opportunity to sit down and
Mm.
read something out of this jar to encourage
Mhm.
you and lift you up. And so
Yeah.
doing little things like that is really, really helpful. It's intentional. And depending on
Yes.
their love language, if their love language is words of affirmation or acts of service or gift giving, it
Mhm.
covers all of that. It covers all
Yes.
of that. So
Yeah.
those are
Yeah.
really good ideas that you can think of.
Yeah.
Um,
And actually, may I add something there
Go
too
ahead.
with ADHD? As you were talking about, like the encouragement jar, maybe think about rejection sensitivity, which is a very common feature in people who have ADHD. And so there is this like really intense and exaggerated emotional response to different things that are happening, whether it's actually happening or there's a perception we think that it's happening. And so rejection, criticism, failure, things like that. And so I think that what you're talking about with the encouragement jar is definitely helpful.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're big. I'm very, very big on words of affirmation and just like really cute
Mm-hmm.
little simple ideas that are cost effective and impactful.
Yeah.
Like you never know what your jar could do for your friend,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's nothing that took you a whole bunch of time,
Yeah.
but it could save a life. Like it
Yes.
literally is the difference between my day is going to really be horrible and wow, my friend
Mm-hmm.
is awesome. you
Yeah,
know
for sure. For
so
sure.
think of that, and think of that for your kids too. Like think
Mm-hmm.
of different
Mm-hmm.
ways that I think like we were beaten because our parents did not have the patience to figure anything else out.
Yeah.
Like we not trying to, no, you getting your butt beat. You broke a rule, you getting your butt beat. We ain't got time for
Yeah.
timeouts and 3 minutes and
No.
how long you gonna sit
Gentle
there and
parenting.
gentle parenting and talk to you about you. But nobody got time for that. You getting your butt beat, you shouldn't have done it. And that's how much they had time for. But we as millennials and further on, I would hope my kids are gonna have this patience to sit and actually communicate with
Yeah.
their kids about their feelings and think of different methods. I was just talking to my
Mm-hmm.
therapist the other day and I was like, I don't want to whoop him because of
Mm-hmm.
my frustration. Like
Yes.
he's not
Yes.
frustrated. He's not angry. I'm being impatient and I am frustrated and
Yep.
I don't need to take that out on you.
On him.
I need to
Yeah.
figure a different way out. So give
Yep.
yourself time to figure a different way out. Our parents
Mm-hmm.
didn't take the time to be like, well, maybe if I talk to you a little softer, maybe you would listen. I don't know. They didn't have the time to do that. The
That's
world
true.
didn't give them the time to do that. They didn't have
Yep.
the opportunities to do that
Mm-hmm.
like we
Mm-hmm.
have with our children. So take
Yeah.
the time and don't beat them up because of your lack
Yep.
of patience and emotional maturity.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. That is so true.
So, Dr. P, I want to thank you again for
Yeah.
being here and coming on the show. We love having you. You are
Thank
a well
you.
of knowledge and wisdom.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you want to share before I pray and send us off?
Yeah. You know what? We've talked about this, and also this is one of my favorite things to talk about: ADHD, neurodivergence, all that stuff. And so, we've talked about it from the lens of children and parents, but ADHD is something that is also very prevalent in adults. So those of us who are not diagnosed as children, right? And so yes, we're talking about it with our about this topic about our kids, but we also have to be intentional and pay attention to the things that we're doing, because you might see that the things that you're complaining about your kids doing, you're also doing the same thing, or you're actually the same way, right? And so I would really encourage us as adults to also be attentive to some of these things and prioritize our wellness too, and do some investigating, like talk to a therapist or talk to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a primary care provider even, and get the help that you need. It's not restricted to just children. Adults have ADHD too.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Get the help that you need to keep your mental health in check. Listen, let's pray, and we will see you all next month. Father God, I thank you for everyone represented on this line tonight. God, I pray for their hearts, their minds, and their spirits to come into alignment with your plan and your will and your way for their life. God, I pray for you to consume them with a peace tonight that surpasses all understanding. I pray for the parents that are raising neurodivergent children that are on the spectrum. God, I pray for you to give them a special patience, a supernatural strength and endurance to be able to handle the weight and the challenges that they may be facing. God, I pray that you would give them strategy, give them insight, give them tools, give them support, give them friends that understand, give them a support system that understands. God, I thank you that they will figure out how to do this in a way that helps their children to become who you desire them to be, and not just who they desire them to be. God, I pray for your spirit in us and in our children, that we would be a model of your order, that we would be a model of your patience, that we would be a model of your love, that we would be willing to sacrifice ourselves first before sacrificing our children. God, that you did that for us. May we be that kind of parent to the prizes and promises you have given us. I pray, God, for sweet rest. I come against depression, suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideations. I come against every weight that would keep us from sweet rest. And I thank you, for I believe it is so. And so it is, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Listen, we love y'all. We want to remind you to speak well, because the power of life and death is in your tongue.
Absolutely.
Whatever you speak, you will see. I want you to think well, because God will do exceedingly abundantly above anything you could ever ask or think. And as long as you are speaking well and thinking well, you should be able to produce well. But until next time, we want to remind you to keep your mental health in check. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Okay. Bye, Facebook. Bye, YouTube.